All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the County of Los Angeles Citizen Redistricting Commission public meeting. Today is October 27, 2021, and the time is 6:33 p.m. We will now call the meeting to order. As a reminder to the public, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to youtube.com/LA County Redistricting. The link to the recording will also be posted and accessible through the Los Angeles County Redistricting website. If at any time any members of the public has any technical difficulties, please let us know in the Q&A and we can work towards fixing the issue. I will now take the roll. As a reminder, commissioner names will be called in a rotating alphabetical order by last name. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Commissioner Apolonio Morales.
Present.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Yes, present.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpanela Segura.
Present.
Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Present.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Present.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Present.
Commissioner John Bento.
Present.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Present.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Present.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
For some reason, the space bar trick didn't work. I'm present. I do want to take this opportunity to note that although I was absent for last meeting, I watched the video today of last meeting, so I'm up to speed.
Thank you. Commissioner Mary Kenny.
Present.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Present.
And Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Present.
Thank you. I will now turn the agenda over to Co-Chair Williams.
Thank you, Ty. Approval of, oops. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it said I was muted. The agenda is approved. However, I do want to note that for action item 5B, we expect a robust discussion with the item preceding it, action item 5A. So we're going to keep it on the agenda, but we may not get to it. So I just want to note that pending the discussion and outcomes of 5A, we may not get to 5B. But other than that, the agenda is approved. Okay, Ty, can you go through the process for public comments and we'll see if we have any public comments today?
Definitely. So if any members of the public are interested in making a live public comment, you may submit in the Q&A your name, your affiliated organizations, if any, and the agenda item you would like to make a public comment on. Because we do have a few agenda items today, please be sure to put in the specific agenda item you would like to make a public comment on. When you are called to make your public comment, you will be prompted to unmute your mic so you can speak, and you may turn your video on if you are comfortable. If you are participating via phone, press *9 to raise your hand. And once called upon, press *6 to unmute and speak. Each person will have one opportunity to speak for 1 minute per discussion or agenda item. And additional written public comments, including public comments for specific communities of interest or on any submitted maps, can be submitted to the public comment form for those specific agenda items. And you can find the link in the chat or on the CRC website. Again, I do want to reiterate, when you do put your name in the Q&A, please indicate which agenda item specifically you would like to make a public comment on.
And Ty, while you're checking the Q&A for people who want to make a general public comment and not one for a specific agenda item, I do want to point out that we have had members of the public sometimes type comments into the Q&A, and those comments really need to go into that link. So I encourage them to use the link and not the Q&A. The Q&A is to sign up like a speaker card to speak. So we have any for general public comment?
We might have one. Again, I do want to remind members of the public, please put into the Q&A your name and the specific agenda item you would like to make a public comment on. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take over the screen so we can have the timer. And we will start with David Peterson. So David, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself And if you are comfortable, you may share your video. I'm
Actually,
sorry,
I
David
think
has a
David,
different agenda item. I'm sorry about that.
that's okay.
So our first is Chris Rowe. So Chris, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and if you're comfortable, you may share your video. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening. I just wanted to say that after watching, and if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Pretty's presentation last night, I would have loved to have seen the 7 maps last night that were there. And especially when I looked at the maps later, I would have liked to have seen Commissioner Kenny's. And was it Commissioner Stetcher that also had done some maps that were graded very well? So I really would like to see more maps tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. With that, I don't believe we have any other members of the public for this agenda item. Co-chairs, would you like to close this item? Public comment on this item?
Yes, please. We will move on to action item 5.
So I'll handle action item 5A, which is a continuation of our discussion of last night. Update and discussion of the maps submitted by the public and as well as the commissioners. Before we get to additional presentation by our consultant on the maps, there's a couple of reminders, I think, for the public as well as the commission. And if I could see those slides. So first, the caveat, same caveat as last night, that we are going to be looking at maps that have different, all the maps we're going to be looking at have 5 districts. That's a requirement in order to be able to submit the complete map. But the numbering on those maps may not necessarily reflect the submitter's desired district placement in terms of the numbers. In part because the first time you create a district, that's automatically numbered 1 by the software. You have to actually manually change it if you wanted to renumber it. So at this point, as we discussed last night, we don't want the commission or the public to get invested in where is District 2, on this particular map, or 5 or whatever. We may in fact be renumbering, and it sounds like, although we didn't have a particular vote last night, it sounds like what we're going to probably end up doing is, as we go to the stage where we're going to select maps to accept for public and to receive public input at public hearings in the next month, we're probably going to try to approximate the numbering of the districts on the maps to some extent to be reasonably close to the existing district numbers, primarily to avoid as much as possible the issues of voter delayed voting and accelerated voting opportunities by the voters in those districts. So just don't get locked down into the numbering scheme itself at this point. This is we're showing you now in this slide the existing districts, and you see generally 5 is in the North County, generally 4 is in the coastal zone, and so forth. And when we get maps that we're going to be adopting, we're going to probably end up, that remains to be seen, but we may in fact end up changing some of the numbering to more closely approximate this kind of scheme. And then finally, a reminder for the public as well as the commission as to the nature of the numbers we're going to be looking at in terms of the population numbers. As everyone knows, we're required to follow certain statutory criteria in creating the districts. And the first criteria is each district has to have reasonably equal population with all the other districts, which means roughly 2 million people per district. Total population, therefore, is used in terms of creating the districts. That's the primary number we look at in terms of figuring out if the districts have roughly equal population. However, just merely having that population number is not sufficient, because We also may want to consider the race of the various race and ethnicity of various voters. And for that, we want to look at the CVAP, the Citizens Voting Age Population, and the voting age population. And those numbers also should be provided along with the maps when we are evaluating it. The CVAP number, the Citizen Voting Age Population, is the relevant number for Voting Rights Act purposes. And for example, if you only look at the total population, as an example, if you create a district, if somebody creates a district that has a majority of the total population is Latino, and you do not consider CVAP, the Citizens Voting Age Population, you could be creating a majority Latinx district in terms of total population, but it may have less than 50% of the total voters being Latino, Latinx. So just something to keep in mind as we go through this exercise. And finally, our criteria again, and I know this is sort of burned into your memories, at least for some of you, through our slideshow that we did for our public hearings, but we have statutory criteria we're supposed to follow. First is to establish reasonably equal population numbers, and we can have a deviation of 10%. Second, to comply with the Voting Rights Act. And so we want to look at percentages in relation to total population, but also importantly with regards to CVAP numbers as well. Once we have maps that we want to put forward for consideration, our consultants and in the voter polarization analysis, Bruce Adelson and Dr. Jonathan Katz, will evaluate those maps and let us know if there's any issues there. We want to make sure all parts of the district connect with each other, geographic contiguity, and ideally to minimize the splitting of cities, neighborhood councils, unincorporated neighborhoods, and communities of interest. Preserve geographic integrity of cities, neighborhoods, communities of interest is part of this. Number 5, we don't want to bypass nearby populations in drawing districts to create odd shapes, ideally compactness, but of course compactness is a goal, but is lower down on the list of these criteria. Where it's reasonably practicable, we're seeking compactness. And then finally, we are not allowed to favor or disfavor any political incumbents, candidates, or political parties. So that's just a refresher of our criteria that we're going to be that the maps are supposed to follow. We are also going to be considering some map groupings ideas, and Commissioner Stetcher has put forward a chart which we'll look at in due course in terms of trying to make sense of all the different maps that we have, because I think as you've now no doubt seen as commissioners, when you looked at the various maps, there are certain kinds of groups that stick out. In other words, certain numbered maps are more like each other than they're different. And they have different goals. And in some cases, the submitter states what the goals are. And so we have some sense of that. So this might be a way to think about into group maps. And I'll ask Commissioner Stetcher to explain that further at an appropriate point. But I think we're going to start with our consultant Preeti's presentation of the maps, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe Preeti is just now logged on.
Oh, okay. So we'll have her presentation. We'll have commissioners' clarification questions. If we could try to hold those until an appropriate point in the presentation, I'd appreciate that. Then we'll have public comment, and then we can go back to the commissioners to discuss the maps further. Okay, Preeti, are you ready with your presentation?
Good evening.
Good evening.
what I would, I can go over the maps like we did yesterday. And then I can also talk about the way we have analyzed the maps and present that information to you. So would you like to see the maps like we presented yesterday, or would you like to see the presentation continuation of what we did yesterday?
At least for me, I'm not quite sure what the distinction that you're drawing is.
Okay, then let me start with my report. All right, so today, as of today, the number of maps that have been submitted, we have 27 plans or maps that have been submitted. 2 plans were submitted using the non-RDU based software, so they are still to be analyzed. 20 plans were submitted by citizens and 7 were submitted by commissioners. And we have a listing of those. 1 by Commissioner Mary Kenny, 2 by Commissioner Stetcher, and 4 by Commissioner Boltzmann. Like we talked about, and co-chair Maeda, just like you had done a refresher on redistricting requirements, we are trying to incorporate those as we look at the maps which have been submitted by the community. Now, maximum deviation is the first one, where it should be under 10%. And while we can just look at, if a certain plan makes the cut just because it's under 10%, we are also looking at the number which says, which shows how equal the districts are. Then your second point was about communities of interest. And yesterday we spoke about the communities of interest that were taken into consideration. And yesterday we talked about the consolidated statistical areas for the whole county. And there are I went back and looked at that data. There are 226 cities which are in the county and 122 unincorporated areas. Then 99 LA City neighborhood councils. And then we talked about the COI models that we had developed. COI A, which has 27, COI B, 26, and 28. Then we also looked at the compactness score. And there are several tests that we mentioned yesterday. And we chose the Polsby-Popper test, which measures the compactness of the shape. Understand that compactness is a little bit lower on the redistricting criteria, but it is important for analysis, so we did include it. Then minority districts based on CVAP is one of the criteria that we looked at. And this is the model that we had presented yesterday. And we had discussed, that there could be overlap and there could be different ways of looking at the communities of interest. So we did go back and we evaluated all 25 maps which are on the website. And we liked what Commissioner Stetcher has done. So we did not look at the visual part or the groupings that is presented. So here we were able to look at the maps, and looking at this way we looked at that, we found that there are in the top tier, we found that there were 4 maps And this was based on just looking at the various factors that I talked about. So in the top tier, we have these four: 14, 15, 17, and 25. So we went and we looked at the shapes of the districts and do further analysis, but based on the communities of interest and the maximum deviation and the COI models, these were the ones that came on the top tier. And we looked at
Pretty, I have a question. On yesterday, you also, I thought we looked at 004, the San Fernando Valley, that was a top tier for as well.
Yeah. Commissioner Franklin, these are the ones, and then on the next slide, I'm going to show you more, which are still in the top tier. So these are the ones that came up. So 14, 15, 17, and 25. And to continue with the top tier, we have 26, which came in after yesterday's meeting. And then the others, we have 4, 8, 18, and 27. And if you look at the shapes, you know, that's not one of the criteria that we want to look at, but we also, after evaluating the plans based on maximum deviation, based on communities of interest and all the things that I had mentioned, we went back and we said, how do these top tier maps look like? So these are all, we put them in the top tier, and the only reason based on it's like 24, 23, and 22. So this is how the maps look like, and these all happen to be in the top tier. Then what we also did was we went back and we said, what do the maps look like that are in the lower tier? So when we looked at the lower tier maps, some of the maps which got lower score, primarily because of the districts, the way they are, and the way they are splitting the communities of interest. So these are the ones that got lower scores. And districts which were not that compact, or they were splitting COIs, and they were splitting the neighborhood councils. So these were the ones that got a lower score. And that is how we had looked at all the maps submitted so far. So like I said, 27 maps have been submitted. 2 of them we are still to evaluate because they were not readily available as shapefile. We did get the shapefile, but we have to process them. But this has been our analysis so far. And now, you know, we can add on tiers here where we can look at various groupings and then try to see which maps would move to the second round of analysis.
Commissioner Oprinella Segura's hand is raised for a question of clarification.
Sure.
Yes, so I'm assuming the other maps that were not presented on screen are just somewhere in between. I'm curious to see how those rank because some of the maps that I had looked into, I guess, are in the middle. And then my second question is the 2 that have not been processed, are those the ones that were submitted as PDFs or were they submitted?
Yeah, they were submitted as PDFs.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Morales.
Yeah, if we can go back, PT, to the criteria once again, the COIs. Okay, so I see 226 cities. I think that's still wrong, correct?
that is the data layer which has been provided to us by the county GIS department. And if you would like to see them, I can pull them up on the map. And it's not about correct or not correct. That is the data set that we have. And that is what we are using. And those are actually, I have the boundaries for them, so I can show them to you.
Yeah,
Um,
Just
but
to,
it still says 226 cities, and that there aren't 226 cities in the county of Los Angeles.
There are 88 incorporated cities in Los Angeles County.
So I believe pretty, it's 87 cities. And then the difference between 87 and 226 are the areas within the city of LA, which makes up the 88th city.
It's
In other
just
words,
the
those are
wrong label.
neighborhoods.
They're not cities. They are 226 cities and neighborhoods within Los Angeles.
Correct.
all right. So yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, because I don't know how this gets tabulated into a number that then influences how the ranking of this maps gets determined. And so I still find this very problematic unless you can explain it to me, you know, in a simplified version of this, because I keep seeing cities and it's problematic to me. So if we can just clarify that, and just, again, I thought I made that clear last night, but we need to determine what that is.
Sure, absolutely. Let me just end this and
And I'm calling on the commissioners. I will apologize to the public. I have broadcasted to my personal YouTube channel rather than the CRC. So Ty is alerting the folks of the right YouTube. I'm just going to take the hands raised in the order I see them on the screen. Commissioner Vento, followed by Commissioner Wong.
No, my question was answered. Thank you, Commissioner Morales.
Commissioner Wong. followed by
Yes,
Commissioner-
yes, hi, thank you. It is somewhat related to Commissioner Morales, but generally, I am not sure. I know that we gave feedback on the criteria, and I guess it's not clear to me if that feedback was taken. For instance, I believe that we thought that there was an overemphasis or overweighting of the neighborhoods and cities and CBASs, or whatever they were, that acronym. And so we wanted to consolidate it down, as well as consolidate the communities of interest, because as I recall, you gave like 15 points for all the three models of the COIs. And I believe we asked for a consolidated number, not so that the total would be 5, not 15. So I guess, Prit, did you mind just quickly going through and letting us know how you changed the evaluation according to our feedback? Because I'm not sure, you know, how it was incorporated. Our feedback was incorporated into your model. And so it's unclear to me, you know, how to evaluate this point system at any rate. And the other issue I guess I want to raise is that actually two of the maps that I really am interested in and need to see before I can make a recommendation are the People's Block map and the MALDEF map, which are the ones that you have not been able to analyze yet because it was submitted, I guess, as a PDF as opposed to using our software. So if you could prioritize that, that would be very helpful, because those two maps I am very interested in. Thank you.
Since these are points of clarification, Pretty, do you want to respond to that before we go on to the next commissioner? Pretty, if you're talking, you're on mute.
what we have done is we have actually, so it's not necessarily the score. Basically, if we are giving a score to one plan, we are treating every plan the same way. So if emphasis is given on one particular neighborhood splits or the unincorporated cities and these incorporated cities, it's all the plans are getting the same thing. So it's not like that we are treating different plans differently. So that is what it is. But once again, we have the data and we can provide the data that we have worked hard to get for each plan. And then that information, you don't have to use the scores that, once again, this is like an initial methodology. We did change it a little bit, but the data is there and we can choose to score whichever way you would like.
I'm sorry, Chair's prerogative. Pretty, the question was, how did it change? How you're showing us now some scores. So the question is, how did you change the model? If you could show us the model again, I think that would be helpful.
Sure. What we changed in the model was that while we are looking at all these COIs and we are looking at these, we did go back and let me check. So for a minute, let's not worry about the score, but we did look at each, since we have all these layers, and we did look at each one of them. So we are looking at variations of the model where we can just use one COI, or we may not use the 348 consolidated cities layer that we have. The model is whichever one you would like to choose, the data is there and you can choose that. So, but in the current score that we have taken out the visual or the demographer's role that we took out. We worked with yesterday we got this feedback that the compactness score, we should sum it up and use it, or use the average. We tried that variation and it did not seem to work any better than what we had, because if there were like 2 or 4 districts which were good, which had a certain score, but when we averaged it out, it did not seem to work that well. So we did take your feedback on the compactness score. We took it on visual inspection, and also currently the minority districts, you said to use the CVAP rather than the total population that we were using. So currently in this model, we are not using minority districts because that data was still being worked on and we did not have that ready to present. So the current model that you're seeing is based on maximum deviation. You're seeing it on the splits, the COI splits, the Polsby-Popper test, and that is all that the model is using right now.
Let's take additional questions then from the commission.
Commissioner Stetcher, followed by Commissioner Holtzman.
I don't have a question.
Commissioner Holtzman, followed by Commissioner Orpanelli-Segura.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions about this evaluation scheme. The first one is just wondering in general if it comes from a respected source, and if so, is the source of what is the source of this evaluation scheme, and has it been used before in other places in redistricting efforts? So let's start with that question, then I have maybe a couple more.
Okay, that's a good question. This is since we are a large county, and so far we have seen 27 maps, and we felt that based on the redistricting criteria, if we could come up with a way where things would be easier for you to pull out the maps and be able to select them or have some way of selecting it. So this is something that we have been developing based on what we heard in your public hearings, that communities should not be split, or my community is split. So we first gathered the data, and then, the scoring is totally optional. We gathered the data, which we think is very useful for you as commissioners, where you can look at maximum deviation. You can look at how many cities or COIs are being split and what the compactness score is. So in essence, what I would...
I'll interrupt this, so I don't go on too long. The answer to my question is that you developed this, not an independent respected source. And
well, I would like to say we are a respected source, because I have worked at the Department of Justice, and actually I have had 5 years of experience, and I supported the attorneys doing exactly this, because they got plans from all over, and we had to figure out how to evaluate the plans. So basically, this is compilation of data. Whichever way you would like to use, we can provide that data to you.
So one thing on your independence, I'm concerned that you're giving too much weight to the public comments and what we heard in meetings. That's a biased sample of the population. We have our own statutory requirements to meet, and we should actually discount a little bit of what we heard from the public, because it is a biased sample. In general, though, you're not telling me that the DOJ has used this type of evaluation in the past, points-based evaluation for reading maps. Is that right?
Commissioner Holtzman, I need to interrupt because we have a hiccup in our system, and I don't want your question to be lost because it's not being recorded on the YouTube channel. So I'm going to ask the co-chairs if we could take a break for a few minutes while I stop the YouTube recording and reboot it so we can have all the comments captured.
Of course.
Okay, I apologize for this, and we'll return then to Commissioner Holtzman.
So let's take a couple minutes.
Okay.